Society Soup Supper. We're glad to see everybody tonight, and we have a great program, and we're all anxious to see. I have a few announcements before we get to the main festivities, and that is, first of all, we have some important folks, and everybody's important. But there's one person who hasn't missed a soup supper, and who is an elected official, and she's my favorite mayor, Yvonne Parks. We also have from the city of Desert Hot Springs City Council, Councilwoman Jan Pye. Also tonight we have Michael Chittister and a whole group of people from Cabot. And forgive me if I just acknowledge Mike, but Cabot's people, raise your hand. How about that? We have also another honored guest, Michael Hammond. Will you raise your hand, please? You're saying, why am I clapping? That's because Michael is the executive director of the Agua Caliente Cultural Museum. So we're very honored. And back to homegrown, we have Mr. Aquaman himself, John Furby. I serve on the Mission Springs Water District Board, and John is all about water, and we just have our new Health and Wellness Center dedicated, and indeed, there's a pool there, a little tiny pool, named the John H. Furby Aquatic Center. Did you get your Doc brownies and Virginia marshmallows? I want to thank our Historical Society folks for manning the table in the back when you checked in. Alta Hester and Marge Snell, thank you. And let's see, lastly, I'm going to say these things twice, once now and once at the end of the meeting. Desert Hot Springs Historical Society, we're honored to preserve, protect, and educate about the history of our town. We have a website, dhshistoricalsociety.com. We're constantly putting new things on there. Our archives are growing, and by the way, if you have any pictures or memorabilia of Desert Hot Springs and you would like to have more people see them than just you can loan them to us, and we'll scan them into our computer, we can get them up on the web, and it's very valuable for all. If you'd like to join us, it's $25 for the year, and it helps us keep our website going, do things like this, and your presence here tonight helps us as well. We're very grateful. Speaking of other things that are here in this room tonight, we have Audrey Moe's book, Celebrities in Hiding, in the back. If you haven't picked up a copy to buy and read, this isn't Borders. Is that maybe why we don't have Borders anymore? I don't know. It's there also. Cabot has some new brochures that I see there, so you can pick those up. And lastly, we meet as a historical society the first Thursday of every month, and we used to meet consistently at the Sidewinder, but we're going to move around town, and the next meeting is going to be at the Mission Lakes Country Club. And I want to thank my Vice President, Dick Cromwell, for coordinating that. Thank you, Dick. And we'll find other places also that we'll be informing those that want to join us for breakfast as we talk about our town and our history. And so, without any further ado, I'm going to bring up our education chair to our society, Audrey Moe. She's going to introduce our guest speaker tonight. Audrey?
Thank you, Jeff. It is with great pleasure I get to introduce tonight's speaker, Jason Bruecks. Now, if you've been to the Camelot Theater recently, you've experienced Jason's exquisite photographs on the big screen while you waited for the movie to begin. And what a nice experience that always is, to see nature while you're waiting rather than ads for popcorn and cars and whatnot. And tonight we've been treated to some of Jason's, what did you say, 300 photographs on our own screen. And the only thing is that we have so much ambient light that they lost a lot of color, because in the Camelot they are exquisite. Now, in addition, Jason is going to relate some stories about his years at Cabot's Pueblo Museum working with Cole Eyraud. Jason has been in the desert since 1973, and he now serves as general manager of the Camelot Theaters. Cord and I first met him when we went to Cabot's Pueblo Museum for the very first time and decided to take a tour. And who was our tour guide? This was in the early 2000s, but Jason Bruecks, who was training another docent at that particular time. So we got to have our tour by the master himself, Jason. Later, Jason was also part of a fundraiser we hosted with Hugh Hauser as our special guest for Cabot's. And some of you here may remember attending that event. But anyway, tonight we're very privileged to have Jason as our speaker, and he's going to talk about I Was a Kid at Cabot's. Jason?
I would first like to thank Jeff Bowman. Thank you for having me here. Audrey Moe for contacting me and asking me to speak tonight. I also like to take the opportunity to, first, Mayor, thank you very much for attending. We go back, Janpai and I go back all the way from the time that I first started with the museum, in the sense with the commission. So 1999, July. And very pleased to have you here. Of course, the members of the Cabot's Museum, I'm so very proud that it has gone from a commission to a nonprofit and the success. I love this, the community outreach between the Historical Society and the museum. It's very pleasing after so many years to see this type of partnership and how it's flourishing. My friends from Camelot Theaters, I'm going to do something that I do with all presentations. If your cell phone's on right now, take the opportunity to shut it off. My hiking group, Palm Springs Distance to Be Traveled, it's a pleasure having you guys here also as well. And Michael Hammond with the Agua Caliente Cultural Museum. I'll give you one more nod. One thing that's happening over at the Camelot Theaters is the Native Film Festival, which will be occurring starting Wednesday, February the 27th, and going all the way through to that, ending that Sunday. Extraordinary festival that looks at Native people from all around the world. Let's start out with that the person who I was when I was 8 years old to the person who I am today obviously is not the same person that you see between the picture to whom I am. What I mean by that is that anyone who would take the opportunity to go through the historical records, whether that was through the newspaper or if there was a brief mention of me at the Cabot's Museum, they would discover an individual that was named Jason Jones, and not Jason Bruecks. And of course, the wonderful thing about families and the the connection and the breakup of families is sometimes you get into positions where through remarriages you get adopted by your stepfather, who is a wonderful individual. Maybe some of the old timers remember Keith Jones, who ran Air-Cool Air Conditioning here in Desert Hot Springs. And then I changed my name back to my biological name when I was 18 years old, and once again became Jason Bruecks. It is truly an honor to take you back to my sandbox. I joke with people all the time that Cabot's Museum, when I was 8 years old until the age of 11, was an area that not only gave me an opportunity to develop confidence around people, which I was a very timid child back then before I got involved with the museum, but what an extraordinary opportunity to Cole must have been a very lenient individual, because I had run the museum in the sense of being pretty much able to go in any building, any room, any place on the property. And my mom had to be a very brave individual, because just the idea of potentially getting tetanus on the property was very scary. Before I go any further on this journey back to my childhood, I do want to take an opportunity to recognize an individual who, the struggle of reopening the museum was a wonderful accomplishment when it occurred. But I don't think the city of Desert Hot Springs truly knew what it had, and I know the general public didn't truly know at that time what it had when it reopened again, until this individual came onto the property and filmed it. And a blessing is that every spring the show has shown over and over and over again. My introduction to Huell Hauser actually came from one of our commissioners, Lucy Whitmarsh, who was on the original commission. And she had been trying for over a year to get Huell Hauser to come to the property. When he finally agreed, he asked to speak to me, and I called him on his cell phone. Or excuse me, not cell phone at that point, but on his home phone. And I swear to God, I got his voice message, and the voice message went exactly like this. Hi, you reached Huell Hauser in beautiful Palm Springs, California. I'm not in right now because I'm next to my beautiful pool in Palm Springs, California. But if you leave your name and your number, I'll get back to you as soon as I can in beautiful Palm Springs, California. His energy and his excitement. If there was ever a showmanship to Huell Hauser, it was never. What I mean is that his personality and his energy carried true to pretty much anyone he ever met. Whether I had seen him at the little cafe at Rick's Cafe in Palm Springs or out on the streets of Palm Springs, he took the time to be generous with his energy, his excitement, true passion, and a believer that nature of California was important, and that historical sites and historical buildings were a key interest in understanding our past and celebrating towards our future. And his excitement on the property was truly wonderful. He was an individual that when we walked on the property, I said to Huell Hauser, I said, do you want an opportunity to walk through and see all this stuff? And he goes, no, Jason, I don't want to see any of that. I want to see it as if I'm seeing it the first time, and I'm seeing it the first time. We only did 2 takes on that entire day. 1 take because I got nervous and stumbled over my presentation, and the second take was because of him, because when he first walked into the kitchen, he goes, oh no, I got to back up and start all over again. I said, well, what are you going to do? He says, you just watch. And he got to the little door into the kitchen, and he stopped there, as it is in the video. He said, these people must have been really small. So I thank Huell Hauser for putting Cabot Yerkes Museum back on the map, and his celebration of California, a place that I truly love, that for so many years through his television show rediscovered the beauty of California. So I just wanted to acknowledge Huell Hauser. Alrighty, let's see if this. We'll get to Desert Hot Springs. So let me take you back to my sandbox. My sandbox is full of wonderful memories. Memories that the uniqueness of the museum, the way it was set up, the celebration of the hot mineral water in Desert Hot Springs, and its excitement to a testament of a man who created literally a building. This is a castle. This is a poor man's castle. This is the type of castle you built when you have no money at all. This is what you build. The points that I'm going to be talking about in this particular presentation goes as follows. My attraction to Cabot's Museum, my introduction to Cole Eyraud, becoming a tour guide at the age of 8, probably for the Historical Society, which I'm hoping to share with clarity, is my memory of each of these rooms and how they were set up. The other docents that worked with me at the time the dedication of the historical marker, the painful retirement I had at age 11, the last time I saw Cole Eyraud at the museum and what he meant to me, the reintroduction to the museum out of all places, the Desert Hot Springs Public Library, the walkthrough and the work ahead to reopen the museum, and the first day of the museum commission. Desert Hot Springs, 1978. I love this sign. There is no place like this place anywhere near this place. This must be the place. You drive into Desert Hot Springs, you know this is Desert Hot Springs. 1978, as follows. The Animal Clinic of Desert Hot Springs opened. The Wagon Wheel was still open, which served wonderful hamburgers, I know, because Cole used to buy them all the time. Stater Brothers opened. We had some of the strangest weather in 1978. We actually had it was an F3 tornado that went through Desert Hot Springs. It injured 6 people. This was also a point in Desert Hot Springs history that when it rained, we became an island, which was really great for anyone who was not in elementary school at the time, because it meant they weren't going to school. I unfortunately was in elementary school. At that particular time, Mayor Hank Hess was mayor, and Cole Eyraud was vice mayor. In 1990, we swelled to a population of 7,000 people. Ed Winslow was my principal. And just the following year, in that year of 1980, another school that bears the name of a mayor, Julius Corsini, was our mayor at the age of 46. And Desert Hot Springs, to really a 7-year-old, 8-year-old at that particular time, for me, it was an opportunity to go back into every little hill, canyon, crevice, anywhere I could get into and discover the desert, which I think that was the connecting passion that led me over to Cabot's museum. That's me when I was a boy. That's probably about 9 years old. But my story really begins just on the fringes of 1977. My mom took an active role in local politics. She got to know Bill and Mary Gibson. She had an opportunity to spend time with Corky Larson. And if there was anybody to share your political views with, or seeing the opposite end of those political views, it was Cole Eyraud. Cole Eyraud would tell you exactly how he felt, exactly the moment that he felt, and he would tell you as you were walking out the door too. I never noticed him abrupt, but what I did notice is that once you got him on a subject, he never stopped until he got angry, and then he decided, I guess, to leave. But my mom and him got along very well, and what my mom would do is she would take me up to the property, and this was the time that Peter Toff was working on the carving, and though at that point he was just doing the touch-up to the very end, most of his time actually, which drove Cole a little nuts, was he would spend time carving little statues, which he would eventually try to sell to the general public. So for the longest time, and I think maybe there might be a few of these little pieces left in the museum, he would carve little miniature Indian heads and eagles and those kind of things, and that's what he spent his primary work on. He did, at that time, totally look like a hippie to me, but he was a very nice gentleman. But what I had was free range. My mom would talk to Cole, and I just run all over the property. But when I really took an interest in Cabot's museum was actually after the dedication of the Indian carving, which was on May 20th, 1978. And I wanted, the museum wasn't open that day in the sense of giving tours. There were a lot of public officials that were visiting, part of the dedication. They had a chance to walk through the building, and though I had walked through the building many times before that, I think just as I was moving to the age of 8, there was something that really drew me that I wanted to understand more about this unique building. And my mom took me back on a tour. Now, at that time, I'm 8 years old. Cole Eyraud was 56 years old. I had finished the tour with my mom and Cole, and my mom knew at that point I wanted to do something around the museum. And she came up to Cole and she said, you know, my son here would like to do whatever you need on the property. And I can't even imagine what a 56-year-old man would think of an 8-year-old kid running around the building. And Cole, looked down at me in a very serious face. He talked to me. He didn't talk to my mom. He talked to me, and he said, "Well, kid, there's a broom over there. I would imagine that if you're going to be here for any period of time, there's plenty of dust around here to sweep." And that's where I started. I took that time sweeping, digging, doing whatever he asked me to do. But the nice thing was when he gave tours, I was allowed to go on every single tour with him. And what happened was, in a very short period of time, because this was, once again, at that point in April, by summer I was giving my own tours. I would follow him along on the tours, and I would start saying some of the lines or some of the particular areas that he was showing. And what Cole did was, rather than correcting me, or rather than telling me to be quiet, or it wasn't my turn to speak, he would get quiet. And I would look at him and he'd go on. And I would tell that particular story of that particular object, or that particular bit of history. And as the weeks, or I should say, as the days would continue before we got through summer, over the next 8-week course, I would tell more and more of the story. After the tour, this is the one thing that was really wonderful about Cole. He never treated me like a child. He always treated me like an adult. When we were finished with the tour, he would sit down with me and he'd say, "Okay, I know you said this, but this is what you need to say." And I would say, "Well, why didn't you say that to the patrons?" And he would say, "More than likely, they'll never be back again." And he just had that kind of flair and that wonderful energy about him, and always made me feel very secure. This is how I remember Cole. It's a smaller picture. Of course, this was the dedication in 1981 when it became a historical marker. But Cole was an individual with just a full amount of white curly hair, and he would love to tell stories, which was wonderful about Cabot's Museum because it was nothing but stories. And I wasn't the very first young docent there on the property. Actually, just before I started, Susan Snyder was a junior high student, and she ended up leaving, and the next year I came aboard. So I wasn't the first young docent on the property. After following him that summer, I started giving my own tours, and it's a much different time back there on the property because there were no swamp coolers inside. We always joke that because being built on the back of a hillside and the thick adobe walls, that the room was 10 degrees cooler than it was on the outside. Well, I can tell you 120 degrees, making it feel 110 degrees, was not as cold as I was expecting. What I remember about the museum, and noting once again back in 1978, which there's a very famous person here that moved here in 1978 that's here with us tonight, which is Dot Reed. What I remember about the museum is, first of all, where the current gift shop is now, that was actually a storage area. Of course, originally Cabot Yerkes's garage area. And that was definitely off limits to me, probably for a good reason, because trying to open the door, everything would possibly fall out. If there was a commonality between Cole Eyraud and Cabot Yerkes, it was that they were both pack rats. And there were definitely rooms that you just couldn't even crawl into because of the storage that was kept. But when you would walk into what we call now the water room, first of all, how many people have visited Cabot's Museum? Majority of the people. So as I describe this, I'm going to describe it in the best way I can of the building. First of all, there's 35 rooms, 65 doors, 140 windows, mostly two windows alike, 35, and it might be that a few of the doors are missing, but 35 doors lead to the outside. It stands 4 stories tall in the front. It's 2 stories tall in the back because he built it into the back of the hillside. It was a never completed building. But it definitely was a labor of love, and that was the place that I explored. Back then, there were total, between rooms and halls, a total of 14 places that we would visit. So going into the gift shop first, which was originally the water room, the gift shop was set up where Cole had displays of all different types of rocks and materials and books that he would sell, some items that were left over from Peter Toft that he would sell with these wood carvings. There was a wonderful old cash register that we would take the monies that would come in for the tours, and here is this 8-year-old kid making change and doing the best he can, and thank God Cole didn't really count the money in the end. Not that I would ever take it, but I didn't know math that very well, but Cole treated me very well. At any rate, when we walked into the very first room where the tour begins is where actually the tour begins now, and that setup was pretty much close to the way that it was originally. When you walk into the next room, which is where the pottery room's at, where we talk a little bit now about Cabot Yerkes' birth in the North Dakota Territory, when you originally walked in, where the glass case is to explain to explain Cabot's youth, Cole had a display there, which out of all things was a bunch of frozen snakes that were freeze-dried. But he described what he wanted to do is as people walked in, as soon as we talked about Cabot Yerkes' importance to Desert Hot Springs, Cole wanted to describe what made the desert so unique. So he had areas like, he had cages of sidewinders and rattlesnakes and all these different types of scorpions and little things like that that he kept on that area. What we call, or have called recently, the little Alaskan room downstairs was another area that was always closed because Cole just had a stack of paperwork in. When you walk closer to the end of that first room, the pottery that's in that glass case is exactly the pottery that was there when I was a kid. The area where they have the canteens, as well as the pictures of Cabot Yerkes when he was out here in 1913, 1914, there were photographs and canteens there, but Cole contrasts that with his own personal life. He had an old Harley-Davidson motorcycle from around that particular time. The old-timers around here remember it. And he would talk about his father's life as a stunt double or a stunt worker for the Perils of Pauline. But he did that as a contrast to where Cabot's life was at and what the desert was like at that particular time, which seemed very pioneer, and how LA and the movie industry was moving forward as a contrast. When you walked into the kitchen, I can tell you with almost exact certainty, the kitchen is almost 100% the way it was like when I was a kid. The only thing that would be truly different was when you opened up the refrigerator, knowing Cole's sense of humor, he had a can of Billy beer in there. And he did. The next room, before getting to Cabot Yerkes' living room and the bedroom area, was actually the dining area. There was a table that sat there. You can see the benches that are still there, but there was a little dining wooden table through there. And then the next room, which was very close to the way that it originally was Cabot Yerkes' living room, and then the upper area that started the very first room in the house, which was the bedroom. Truly the only thing that's missing in that area was the headdress that was given to him by Sir William Tompkins, and the full eagle's headdress that went with that, which had over 500 elk's teeth on it. Sir William Tompkins was the co-founder, I think, of the Boy Scouts of America, and also I think he helped develop silent, which it's been a long time since I've done the tour, but I know their relationship was very, very strong, and that was probably the most exquisite piece. Unfortunately, when Cole Eyraud passed away and before the city was able to secure the building, there were 2 robberies, and that was one of the things that disappeared. Going up into Portia's room. Portia's room, almost exactly the way it was when I was a kid. Several things that were missing that could easily be replaced was her little bedroom, or her little bed, which was right next to the window. That her little tiny frame, you think you'll house her trying to squeeze through the door, just how she laid on that bed was absolutely an impossibility to think about. And then all of her hats were displayed in the area that used to be, which I guess now is kind of a bookshelf area, and there's a couple of hats there. There was a transition from Portia's room, and the kitchen was set up pretty closely the way it was. There's a transition from Portia's room to what we call the entertainment room, which is currently off visitation for the public. Here's Cole's sense of humor again. The transition between her living quarters to the entertainment room is probably the most narrowest passage in the entire building, besides climbing up into Portia's observation tower. And Cole, with the sense of humor that he had a bucket there, and he had a stick on top of the bucket. And he would tell patrons, he said, if you can't get squeezed through, I'll put a bucket of lard on you and we'll find a way of getting you through. Which you could get away with. I suppose in the 1970s you can't get away with that any longer. Obviously, if we couldn't get people through that passage, we would get most of them through to the entertainment room and we walk them all the way around. The very first thing that would happen as you're crossing through in this little pathway up to the entertainment area was the very first thing that would greet you was a Kodiak bear on the floor. When you got into the entertainment room, immediately to your left was a picture of Sir Kaiser Wilhelm. And underneath that was a display of all Cabot's mementos from World War I, which included an old camera, a pistol, as well as the multitude of photographs that he took in that time in World War I. As you continued past the piano, which is still there, and you work your way to the back window, and the back window shows you the opposite, or shows you the guest house. To your left-hand side, there's a display case there. In that display case, there was pottery, there was a few of Cabot Yerkes' drawings, and then there was a case immediately to the right, which had this beautiful agua caliente, full, beautiful, I can't remember the name of the type of water, Oya, which was an Oya with the newspaper article of two boys that found this near 20th Street as they were digging around in a sand dune in 1972, 1974, and it was almost in a complete mint condition that he kept in a case there, and it stood probably about this tall. From there, you would go up to the top of the observation tower. And the guest observation tower was a really wonderful point that we had an opportunity where everybody would sit down, we would open up the windows, and we would look out in two different directions. The first direction that we would look out to, which was towards the east, was the well house. And that was a great opportunity to talk about the hot water, the cold water, the earthquake faults, and how what the water meant for Cabot Yerkes and what it meant for Desert Hot Springs. And then we would look out towards Desert Hot Springs, towards Mount San Jacinto. And we would take a look also towards Mount San Gorgonio and talk about the watershed and where the water came from, and the earthquakes and how that water was separated to where one side was drinking water and one side was hot water. We talk about how with San Andreas Fault, how Mount San Jacinto would grow slightly the length of a fingernail every year, and that our community was changing. That the sand dunes at that point in the 70s, especially in the early 80s, we went through a tremendous growth and how the sand dunes began to disappear. But more importantly, we were looking at a contrast between the past and the future, and what that potentially meant for our community and the surrounding community. And Cole was really excited about sharing that with people. From there, we would head downstairs back through the entertainment room into what we would cross into, at that point we called the Alaskan room. When you walked into the Alaskan room, immediately towards your right was a case, and above the case there was a replica, painted replica of the last stand of Custard. And underneath that would be items that were supposedly from that battle, including a pair of moccasins, and a tomahawk and several other items. When you walked past that, immediately towards your left was all the items that Cabot Yerkes had collected from his time up in the Yukon Territory in the gold rush time. So the cargo bins that held the cigars, the cigar molds, the beautiful ivory carvings that he collected from the Inuits and from the Eskimos up in that location. And we took a good amount of time of talking about this individual who, at the age of 16, decided to create this business. Me being at 8 and figuring 8 more years that I could create a business, something like that, that was extraordinary. You know, the one thing about being 8 years old was, and this was a time before video games. I don't even think Pong was out at that point. So we were left to our imaginations. It was still cowboys and Indians. It was still an opportunity to go out and discover the beauty of what was out in the desert. I mean, you either, when you were a kid back then, you either just got in trouble or you found something to keep your mind active. And my mind was active through that building. And truly fascinated with Cabot's story. As we would get to the end of the room, just before we go down the stairwell, this was a point that Cabot, or I should say Cole, I think kind of put a few of his own mementos in there. But it was a point to stop, to ask questions from those who were taking the tour, and kind of give the final story, and the most important story, I think, out of all this, which that this was a building that was far beyond a museum. This was a person's home. And that this person's home, that we were an invited guest, and granted, people paid to be an invited guest over there, but you almost had the feel that at any one particular time, Cabot could be coming through a door, a bedroom area. Maybe Portia was up in her living quarters, but it felt lived in. It was an experience that would be equivalent to the Winchester home. It would be equivalent to Scotty's Castle. It never missed its opportunity that while it shared experiences that Cabot went through in his life, and it helped tell the history of Desert Hot Springs, and it talked a little bit about the geology of Desert Hot Springs, but it never missed its place as a true home of an individual that was a pioneer in our town. The outside grounds was definitely different. Cole had a wonderful way of getting in trouble with the city of Desert Hot Springs all the time. And one of the things that got him into trouble was the animals that he kept on the property, which he did not have a permit for. For an 8-year-old kid, this was phenomenal. Of course, the mule up in the upper corner, Merry Christmas, the burro, who just was an amazing little burro. He had a gray fox. He had a coat of Monday. I am very fortunate still today not to have lost any of my fingers to that coat of Monday. He had over 12 tortoises. One of them had to be over 100 years old. Both Cole and I would call him Grumpy. He would snort, he would hiss, and he would snap at anything that was around him. These were the things that, I mean, these guys were my friends. I mean, every morning I would spend time with them. Every evening before I left, I spent time with them. And they were truly extraordinary. The property itself, of course, the carving, as I mentioned before, was there, but the animals always fascinated people and definitely added a different dimension to the property. Beyond the property and the animals, we come back to this particular image here again. In 1980, my mom gave me an opportunity to go on vacation, and Cole, once again, as I mentioned before, always treated me like an adult. And I went up to Cole, and I said, Cole, I'm going to take 6 months out of the summer, and I'm going to travel with my mom. And Cole looked at me, and he said, well, what am I supposed to do? And I'm 10 years old, I don't know what he's supposed to do. He says, I want you to find me some docents, because I'm not going to do this on my own. And I go, okay, I will see what I can do. And I found Sammy Burke, who was a friend of mine, and Teddy, and they helped out through the summer. And it was an interesting position because he allowed a 10-year-old to fix the problem that was ahead of him. I mean, think about this. The docents, the members of the Cabot's Museum, the volunteers. This was one individual that kept that building open. Occasionally, he had maybe 1 or 2 other individuals. The flow-through of people was extraordinary. I know it's very intense now, but he had the building already open after, well, let's see, it's 69 to 89, so he had the building open well over, 11, 12 years, and the flow of people, I mean, there were days we would see 100 people in a day. And it would be, in some days, it was just Cole. And so an extraordinary amount of people were flowing through that building, and yet he spent the time to keep it clean, he spent the time to keep it fixed up, and he dedicated his life towards this building. What happened was, in 1981, during this event, for the historical marker, which was made it the historical marker of site number 54, he surprised me and he surprised Sammy. He awarded us with a Young Historian Award. And it was a wonderful gift. But I think it didn't do what he thought it was going to do. Because I took it home, and I sat down with my mom and my stepdad, and I said, I think my time is done. I don't know how to describe that at the age of 11. But I felt that the chapter was closed. The problem that I had is I didn't know how to articulate that back to Cole. And I didn't show up that next weekend. And my mom really got on my case about that. And so I went back the following weekend, and I did half the tours, and we were sitting down for lunch. And I said, Cole, after we had finished lunch, because I wanted to make sure I finished lunch. And I said, Cole, I think I'm done. He said, well, we still have a half a day left. And I said, no, I think I'm honestly done. I think that my time has run its course. And Cole goes, okay, I think you better go. And it was a really strange feeling. He wasn't mean. We just closed the door. And I didn't go back until I was an adult. And all I can say is I guess I was getting closer to being a teenager, and it was time to move on. And Cole wasn't mean. He just helped me close that door. And it's still a very emotional thing for me. This is the Cole I saw years later as an adult, which was also kind of difficult for me. The last time I saw him was in 1993. I was walking down Desert View, and he was outside at the front of the property. And I recognized him. He had changed quite a bit. He lost most of his hearing at that point, and he had several strokes. I tapped him on his shoulder, and he turned around, and I said, do you know who I am? And he goes, I know exactly who you are. And I said, I want to take the opportunity to thank you. And he said, well, I appreciate the thanks. We shook hands, and that was the last time I saw him. He passed away October 27th, 1996. Let me put this in perspective. Cabot started it when he was 59, passed away close to 83. Cabot spent 23 years on the property. Taking when Cole Eyraud stood defiantly in front of the city in 1969 until he passed away, when he passed away in October 27, 1969, just shy of his 75th birthday. He was born October 18, 1921. He spent over 26 years of his life at Cabot's Museum. There's not a doubt in my mind that this museum wouldn't be here today without Cole Eyraud. There is not a doubt in my mind that potentially any other individual at that point in time probably could have had the energy, the determination to keep something like that alive. I can't even fathom the sacrifice this individual went through in his personal life. This wasn't a moneymaker. He didn't make a fortune off of it. It wasn't a situation that I think brought him extreme recognition. I think he was an individual that deeply fell in love with the museum, had a brief time to meet Cabot, and just felt his place and his niche needed to be that property. And I was so very, very blessed to have that opportunity, those few years to spend with an individual who became a father figure to me and really treated me beyond what any other adult could ever treat me at, was with respect, and gave me, I think, certain life lessons through life that have really made an impact on my life. The real Cole Eyraud, the one I choose to remember, is best described out of this. He drew this for my mom. His energy and his excitement or his dismay with the city was always apparent. And I love this cartoon that he wrote, or he drew. The first section in the side says, as described in a bond issue. By the way, we're trying to build a swing here. And the second picture was revised by city engineering. The picture over here was recommended by HUD. This was approved by the city council. This is what was built by Parks and Recreation. This is truly what the voters wanted. This is where this man's humor came about over and over and over again. That no matter how he fought with the city at times, his sarcastic wit, he could throw something out at you without a smile, and then, after a minute, he would start smiling. He had this wonderful, odd flair to him that in this town, you either liked him or you disliked him. And there was very little ground in between. But this one drawing is truly, absolutely Cole Eyraud. You know, circumstances over a period of time are amazing in how they marry us back up with situations in our life. And out of all places, of being reintroduced to Cabot's Museum happened at the Desert Hot Springs Public Library. It was a point, let's see, this would go back to 1998. The city had just acquired the museum, pretty close to that period of time. The city council at that point in time, with Chan Pai and several others, had made a determination that the best way to move forward in protecting the museum and making it an icon for Desert Hot Springs was to form a museum commission. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I went to the public library, which I have never gone to before except when I was in elementary school. That one particular day I was interested, out of all things, and the hiking group will probably laugh, was new hikes. I wanted to understand more of what our local area had interest in for particular hikes. And I met an individual named Joseph Marianowitz. I'll remember Joseph for my rest of my life. Joseph and I were talking. He was a volunteer librarian at Desert Hot Springs, and we started talking about hikes and his passion of the desert and my passion of the desert. And he asked me how long I had been up in Desert Hot Springs, and I told him the time frame for that. And he goes, you know, there's so many wonderful things up here. There's a place called Cabot's Museum. And I said, well, I got a story to tell you. And I shared the story, and he goes, well, you know, with Cole Eyraud's passing, in the city now taking over the museum, which I didn't put into my mind until he said it, which kind of threw me. It was like, oh, wow, this is the same city that wanted to destroy the museum. He goes, you really need to be a part of that. You need to put your energy back into this. I'll be totally honest with you. A friend of mine, Gary Bosworth, once asked me 1,000 years ago, he said, you know, you're great at being around people. He said, why don't you run for council? And I said, Gary, I don't have patience to stand in the city council meeting and listen to half the things that people are going to say. And truly, honestly, still at that point of time, I was painfully shy. And he said, Jason, you know the story. You know you're a spirit of this. And I said, Joseph, I just, you know, this is at a point, my son's 4 years old. I said, I don't think I'm ready for this. And he said to me, he said, I'm going to go down and volunteer. He said, why don't you come down with me and just volunteer? That's it. That's all I'm asking for, is just come down with me and let's see what they want from us. So I put in my volunteer application. I was interviewed by Adam Sanchez, who was at that particular time part of Parks and Recs. And Adam said, we're going to do a walkthrough in about 2 weeks. We would very much like you to do the walkthrough. And I joined Adam Sanchez, and Joseph Marianowitz was there, and a couple other individuals. We walked into the building, and my heart broke. All the cases were smashed. The building was left in a position that No matter how dirty you think it is now, it was terrible. There were rat feces. There was some of the major items like Sir William Tompkins' headdress was stolen, was gone. And the work seemed absolutely just impossible to get through, unfathomed on how we were ever going to get this thing open. Shortly after that, Adam said that there was going to be a museum commission that was going to be started, and Adam, out of all things, assuming that we were going to go forward, at that point the city had a major layoff, which seemed almost even more doubtful that we were going to move forward. So we went, and Joseph and I went to apply for the museum commission position, and my battery fell out of this, so I'm going to have to go forward. Excellent. And there was probably about 14 individuals. The Desert Hot Springs Historical Society also made a pitch at that particular time to join this commission. And Joseph Marianowitz, Charles Amendola, Pauline Norroth, Lucy Whitmars, Wesley Laws, still on the museum commission, I believe, or foundation. You know, he left. That was the longest running member. Dr. Tad Lonergan and myself. And on Wednesday, July 14th, 1999, we were sworn in as members. And it started from there. And we took those first steps forward to endeavor to reopen the museum again. I'd like to, as I close at this point, you know how a community actually survives? A community survives by continuous support of its people. The museum will survive and will flourish with the opportunity of individuals who have a love and a passion for the museum, and at whatever level can volunteer, will definitely make a difference to the continuation of Cabot's Museum. I always joke that if Cabot's Museum was built in Palm Springs, it'd probably be plated with gold by now. But that's okay, because in Desert Hot Springs, it gives us our identity. As much as the water gives us our identity, the museum gives us our history, our connection to our past. It archives the oddities and the wonders of Desert Hot Springs, the pioneering spirit of what came about at a time when who in their right mind would get off a train with his friend Bob Carr and say, "This is where I want to live." And by the way, there's too many people in Palm Springs at that point, of 14, 15 people, and so we're going to head up towards this barren area that's windy all the time. But he did. And he created his first home, and he created his second home. And I've had a privilege for a very short period of time out of the span of the history of Cabot's Museum to spend a childhood and then come back and with a tremendous support of volunteers, with a commission at that period of time, in the city who, maybe it was okay that we were financially broke at the time, but I don't think we could have done half the things that we got done on the property, because there was not an opportunity for the city to spend any time at the museum. But you know how proud I feel that there is this wonderful working foundation, a nonprofit that's flourishing, that people are going to see this unique, wonderful building that is, to me, as wonderful, this home that is as wonderful and as unique as going to Scotty's Castle in Death Valley or going to the Winchester home. And that this building is in Desert Hot Springs. If you ever want to volunteer, where are you, Judy? How's this? 760-329-7610. Give them a call. Thank you very much. Do you have any?
Wow. I thought I knew a fair amount about Cabots, but I wasn't even minding the surface. And I just learned so much, and the best thing is that I am now so much more inspired, even though I thought I was before. Now, we can take questions. I'll just give that to you.
John, you start first.
That was very good, Jason. You did a wonderful presentation. I couldn't imagine anybody doing it. But in 1969 is the year I came to Desert Hot Springs. And it's true, the city council had already raised copies, and they were in the process of raising Cabots. Cole Eyraud stood in front of the tractors. That was his tenement square, and he stopped them from doing it. Single-handedly, he was the hero of the century.
And that started the love affair with Cole Eyraud and the city era. Parks.
Yeah, I just wanted to, about a year ago, I was at the Classic Act Beauty Shop, and there was this lady in there getting her hair done, and we just kind of started up a conversation, and she lives right there. I mean, as you go out Pearson and you make that bend, and then there's a road that goes out, and there's about 3 homes just northwest of the museum,
Yes.
up in that area. Do you recall her name? I mean, nobody seems, anyway, we'd like to have her interviewed for the history, because her parcel of land was deeded to her by Cabot as part of his homestead. And so, you know, as part of the history, it would be wonderful to be able to interview her. And Patty Mendoza from the Classic Act drove up there, but the only, you know, there was a big German Shepherd behind the gate. So she couldn't get through, so we thought if you knew a name.
Take a steak and it'll take care of it.
I really honestly don't
You don't remember a woman living up there behind me?
The properties that surrounded Cole Eyraud, I know that one of the properties, which I think was the closest house next to the museum, or maybe even a little further back towards what we call, I don't even know what you guys call it now, but Eagle's Nest 2 or Eagle's Nest 3 before it burned down, or a good section of it burned down. There was actually an old rock church portion up on the top of the hill. And there was a home back there that Cole had worked out, and this was close to my period of time of being on the property, that he had worked out that he was going to sell that section of property. And somehow the deed got all screwed up and he didn't get any money for it. And I know that that was a subject that no one ever brought up to Cole, because it would put him into a tirade. My recollection with Cole is not with really too many adults. I mean, if I ever saw Cole, I watched Cole scream on the phone a couple times. And he gave great tours, but his business with the city or with other individuals was never really in front of me. So no, I never got a chance to meet that
I thought
individual.
maybe in your wanderings you might have wandered on.
I learned long ago I'd never wander into yards with German Shepherds. Another question?
In the back.
Yes.
Not a question, but I had the privilege of serving with Cole on the city council. And he was also my boss when I worked for Sunline Transit Agency. And an absolutely delightful person. I'm so thrilled that his efforts are being recognized. It's just wonderful. Thank you.
Like I said, part of the uniqueness of Cole is that he, knowing him, knew his dedication towards the museum. And really probably the sacrifice in his personal life. But coupled with his energy of being a father figure to me, I mean, it was the best of both worlds. Yes?
When he started building the Pueblo,
Cabot?
Yeah, Cabot. I assume he had already done drilling for the hot and cold water that he called Miracle Hill.
Oh yes, that happened back in 1913.
So how deep did he have to go, and did he drill it himself, or did he bring a rig?
No, he dug his own well. I want to say it was about 60 feet down, 40 feet down. And the way that the story goes, and of course the foundation has done a lot more research, a lot more paperwork has turned out, but I love this part of the story, is that he was digging He originally met an old Indian who had told him that there were old water wells, similar to where they were at in Indian Wells, where you could just walk down and get your water. And there were a few of them up towards Desert Hot Springs, and it was ironic that an individual who knew so much about the desert was walking from his house at Eagle's Nest 12 miles one way and 12 miles, or was it 7 miles one way, 7 miles back the other way, a total of 14 miles. So he started digging on that hillside, and as he got to probably about 30 feet, the ground started getting warm. And as he got to a point where the ground was hot, it was a rock cover, and when he hit it, it bellowed back at him. It was hollow. As I love in the story, can you imagine being all the way down 40 feet into the ground, banging on the rock and realizing it's hollow and it's 120 degrees? I always joke, what would you do? And for lack of a better word, I get the hell out of there. And he dropped this huge boulder down there and it broke the rock surface and he had hot water. The ironic thing was that a little further on the other side of the hill, he dug a well to water his little crops. And the water that came out of there was about 85 degrees. So it split right there at Miracle Hill of an earthquake fault, where on one side of the fault gives us our hot water, which is the northern part. On the south side of that is all of our drinking water. And he was split right on that earthquake fault.
He was actually digging this?
Yes, there was a wonderful, huge shovel that marked the entrance area of Cabot's museum in the very first room, and it was like a 12-foot long shovel to dig down into the well.
Let's take one more.
Yeah, I'm just really curious about your own background and some of the people who were really attracted to the desert. Was your mother born in the desert, or was she one of those people that...
What brought my journey out here to the desert, my mom and my biological dad married in Southern California. I was born in Inglewood, California. We lived in the Palos Verdes Estates. My dad was chief scientist of Hughes Aircraft. One thing that my mom and dad had a commonality is they both hated each other. My sister and I always joke that we were born out of immaculate conception. My mom has long since forgiven my dad. I don't think my dad's forgiven anything. But when my mom and dad divorced, my mom took my sister and I to live out of all places, the Dream Home section in Palm Springs, because my grandmother had settled out there in 1974. At that point, the Dream Home section was still a Dream Home area, a nice area. My immediate passion with the desert was jumping over the fence and exploring the sand dunes in that back area. When my grandmother moved up to Sam's Family Spa, my mom remarried Keith Jones, who had his own air conditioning business out here, and we settled up in the Hacienda Heights in Catalpa. And from there, I was continuing to jump over the fence and discover more of the areas of the desert out here. You've seen some of my photographs. I am absolutely, truly, deeply passionate about the desert, as my hiking group would probably attest to that. So it's a beautiful area. It's extraordinary. I've been all over the place, and there's something about coming back here in the desert and seeing Mount San Jacinto. I mean, even San Gregorio was beautiful. There's nothing like Mount San Jacinto, and that rise, which is basically as if you were going to Baja California to Canada on a tram in 15 minutes. Absolutely, truly amazing and beautiful.
Jason, thank you so much. This is absolutely delightful.
I do have one question for you, Jason. Yes. Were you paid by Cole?
I remember very clearly on my second week there, coming home and sharing with my mom that I made $5 in tips. And I thought I was the richest kid in the world. And I mean that absolutely very sincerely. I was paid by Cole in the sense that I had the best hamburgers from the wagon wheel that one could ever imagine.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you. We are so honored to have Jason tonight. Thank you, Audrey, for finding him, for bringing him our way. For all of our guests that are here, we're so appreciative. And don't forget to visit the table over here that has Audrey's book, Celebrities in Hiding, some new Cabot's brochures. And if you didn't raise your hand and that you had not gone to Cabot's, now you know you need to go. It's that simple. Thank you for coming tonight. DHSHistoricalSociety.com. Blessings to you this new year.